Wow, there is nowhere near enough content on YouTube for this franchise. There's plenty of videos ranking the games in the series, but it looks like I'm the first to make a chapter ranking somehow. This may be completely uncharted territory for me, but to be honest, I just adore this series and wanted to bring it to my channel. For this first video, I'll of course be starting with Drake's Fortune, but if you want to see me look at the rest of the series, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to let me know. Everything is on the table here. Combat encounters, cutscenes, story beats, atmosphere, music, Easter eggs, one-liners. If it's part of that chapter, it's a factor in my ranking. Since I like challenge and have played these games half a dozen times throughout my life, I decided to play on Crushing. This game can be absolutely ruthless on higher difficulties, which both lowers my patience for poorly designed encounters and heavily benefits chapters with well-balanced challenges. While Uncharted music is extremely underrated, which I will be talking about as we go, I'll still be using music from other series for most of these entries for the sake of variety. I also went for each and every treasure for the first time, and while none of these impacted my ranking, I did unlock this beautiful work of art for finding all 60. Looking good, Nate. Before we begin, I'd like to give a brief summary of the game for those who don't remember or aren't familiar with the franchise. Feel free to skip to this timestamp here if you just want to get into the ranking. Uncharted is an action-adventure video game series about shooting enemies in over-the-top gunfights, exploring ancient ruins and uncovering secrets from the past, and climbing damn near anything with the strongest upper body ever known to mankind. The game we're talking about today, Uncharted Drake's Fortune, came out for the PS3 in 2007, though I'll be playing the remastered version from the Nathan Drake collection since it's easily the definitive way to play. Our main protagonist of the franchise is Nathan Drake, the descendant of Sir Francis Drake himself, or so he claims. He's a wisecracking smartass who does pretty much everything by the seat of his pants, but he also has a huge heart and will risk everything for the ones he loves. He's a treasure hunter who's trying to hunt down the lost city of El Dorado, following his supposed ancestor's voyage, and he's joined by his mentor, Victor Goddamn Sullivan. He's a rough old man with a shady past and a very close relationship with Nate. The last of our protagonists is Elena Fisher, a news reporter who gets wrapped up in the adventure just because she wanted a good story for her show. Their group end up on an island off the coast of Panama, where the majority of the game takes place, but they're not alone. A group of mercenaries are after the same prize, led by another cranky old man, Gabriel Roman. So, to summarize, one normal dude with little to no help and little to no combat training whatsoever takes on an entire army in the hopes of beating them to an ancient treasure on a remote island. This is completely absurd and ridiculously over the top, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Let's rank every chapter in Uncharted Drake's Fortune. While there are no outright bad chapters in this game, the Customs House definitely jumps out as the obvious pick for the worst. This entire chapter consists of 2 combat encounters and 2 cutscenes, none of which are standout or memorable at all. The second encounter is kinda creative since you have to jump alongside the building and shoot through bars, and the first cutscene that gives some backstory behind Nate's ring is somewhat interesting. That being said, the first combat encounter is probably one of the worst in the game. It basically devolves into just standing around and waiting for the enemies to come to you, and since there isn't much cover outside this doorway here, there isn't much opportunity to speed things up. On top of that, the second cutscene adds nothing of value and just acts as an excuse to split Nate and Elena. This very well may be the worst cutscene in the game, actually. Their separation here just doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't lead to any plot developments whatsoever. All in all, this is a boring and forgettable filler chapter that you could remove from the game entirely without losing much of anything. To the Tower just feels like a waste of time. The start of Chapter 10 is right on the other side of this massive door over here, and after a brief jet ski portion that's basically just a copy and paste of the one from Chapter 8, the game insists we fight through dozens of enemies and climb this tower to unlock it. The climbing portion is actually pretty enjoyable, but the battles before we get there kinda suck. There's just nothing interesting going on with any of these encounters, and by Chapter 9, combat is starting to get really repetitive. Also, this part here is just complete bullshit. You can't shoot from the water, so your only way through is to either snipe these enemies from the other side of the alley, or hang on this ledge, which barely protects you. I love the look of the flooded city, and this is probably the chapter that shows it off the best, but that's not nearly enough to save it from being this low on my list. I did not expect On the Trail of the Treasure to be anywhere close to the bottom 3, but when I compare it to the other chapters, I realized there just isn't much to this one at all. After a short climbing section and an even shorter combat encounter, we get to the top of the church, one of the trickiest and most interesting climbing sections in this adventure. It doesn't last all that long and can be a little janky, but I really like the presentation and the way the window acts as a platform at the end. After shimmying down the wall, we get a pretty major combat encounter that sadly doesn't add anything unique to the formula. By Chapter 15, I'm just eager to get to the fantastic endgame, but this encounter is pretty damn tough and feels like an unnecessary speed bump. After clearing it though, all that's left is the easiest and most pathetic puzzle in the game, where all you do is rotate these symbols to match their orientation in Nate's journal. Overall, this chapter feels like a boring and slow gateway into the late game, but considering how phenomenal that late game is, I'm not too bothered by it. I'm fairly confident this will be my most controversial placement, but the search for El Dorado is one of the weakest chapters in the game. Unlike most other chapters lower on my list, this one is actually fairly lengthy and complex, so let's start with the positives. Nate and Sully have a great flow of banter throughout this chapter, and it does a great job establishing their relationship. The ruins and especially the jungle are gorgeous to look at, and climbing is introduced in a really fun way. The reveal that El Dorado is a statue and not a city is massive, and an interesting early game plot twist that works pretty well. This part where you're running towards the camera is really memorable, and since the reveal of the U-boat is at the end of this chapter rather than the start of the next one for some reason, it gets another little boost from that as well. That's a lot of positives, so why did I rank it so low?
I'm really wet.
Because despite all it does right, it's just such a massive pace killer right at the start of the game that feels like a tedious slog on subsequent playthroughs. Unless you're a speedrunner and clip through every door, this level takes nearly a half hour to complete, which is just far too long for a tutorial. Not helping matters is the first puzzle, which also happens to be the worst one in the game outside of the one we just talked about from Chapter 15. There's absolutely zero ambiguity here, since the journal tells you exactly which symbols to press and in what order to press them in, and shimmying around the room to reach them takes forever too. There's a lot to love here, and I certainly wouldn't call this a bad tutorial, but this one chapter alone ruins so much of this game's replayability. That is one of the biggest advantages the first game has over the rest of the series, so this really stings. Maybe I'm being a little hard on this one, but Chapter 3 immediately after this one is just... we'll get there much later. Going underground is a short and fairly enjoyable chapter that really starts to get you excited for this game's climax. The first combat encounter with the lights illuminating the damp cavern is pretty unique and memorable, and this is also our introduction to probably the most important location on the island, the church. I love how you open the hatch to reveal a massive shootout, and the puzzle you have to solve after by shooting the bells is pretty clever. The final portion where you go back underground though is just kinda there. None of the climbing portions or combat encounters are bad by any means, they're just somewhat forgettable. In the middle of the chapter, we get an awesome cutscene featuring all three of the main villains, Navarro, Roman, and the legend himself. This cutscene is great because all three villains get a nice chance to show off their personalities. These guys are assholes in completely different ways, and seeing them clash is super entertaining. Roman comes off as commanding and genuinely intimidating, but Navarro is the real highlight. He's clearly hiding something, but even after beating the game and knowing where the plot ends up, I'm not sure what. Does he know the rumors about the curse Eddie was referring to at this point? Or does he not find that out until later and he's only acting like this because he knows he's gonna backstab Roman no matter what? It's a brilliant and highly underrated cutscene that hints at all the major plot twists in the game while still being entertaining even if you have no idea what's going on. This is the first chapter where I don't really have any complaints, and we're still in the bottom 5. A good sign that despite its many flaws, this game still holds up as a worthy addition and a fantastic introduction to this amazing franchise. It feels weird to put heading upriver so low since I do really enjoy the jet ski, but there's absolutely nothing in the chapter outside of that, so I guess it kinda makes sense. The barrels floating down towards you are fun to dodge, and using those same barrels to blow up enemies is super satisfying. Elena uses a standard pistol this time instead of her badass rocket launcher, which feels like a bit of a downgrade, but it does make for a more balanced challenge at least. There has to be a reference to Upstream from the first Crash Bandicoot in here, right? Or maybe the jet ski from one of the later games? I don't know, I only played Crash 1. Like I said, there's literally nothing else to this chapter, so we can just move on. Much like the chapter we just talked about, Out of the Frying Pan is a short but sweet diversion that breaks up the monotony of combat very well while standing out as one of the most unique sections of the game. Here, Elena is driving a jeep through the jungle, which is absolutely gorgeous with all the bright greens by the way, as dozens of Eddie's men chase you down in trucks, jeeps, and three-wheelers. You have to defend the jeep with a mounted turret, firing both standard bullets and grenades, and pun intended, it's an absolute blast. On crushing, it's a little annoying since it feels like you just randomly die whenever the game feels like killing you, but aside from that, zero complaints. I love the part where you go through the cliffside cave, and I really love the part where you go towards the enemy and have to blow up the truck before it hits you head on. The cutscene ending things off is also hilarious. Eddie Raja is easily my favorite of the villains in this game because he bounces off Nate's personality so damn well, and this is the scene that shows it off the best.
Going somewhere?
Hey, Eddie!
Did you really think you could escape from what?
Oh, no, just giving the young lady the $10 tour.
Shut it! I bet you're working for them too.
What?
You thought you could set me up and keep everything for yourselves, hmm?
Damn it! This guy's crazy!
It's a short chapter with nothing to it besides this on-rail segment, but it's presented beautifully and stands out as a nice breather from the pretty repetitive gameplay loop we've gotten used to by this point. Trapped begins with one of the best encounters in the game as we're forced to take on an entire army in this crumbling ballroom. There's enemies of all different types, a turret constantly harassing you, and various types of weapons scattered all over the place. This is absolutely brutal on harder difficulties, but it never feels unfair or cheap due to the fantastic layout of the arena. There's even a sniper rifle hidden down here which opens up a lot more strategies and makes the difficulty feel much more balanced. After clearing out the ballroom and trying to open the door, even more enemies come in and now you get to use the turret back on them. This isn't the first time you get to do this in the game, but it's easily the most satisfying and rewarding. Once they're cleared out, we walk down some stairs only for Elena to return and inform us that Sully is still alive somehow. He was shot on screen all the way back in Chapter 3 for those who haven't played this game or don't remember. This is a well done and unexpected twist since it's been multiple hours since his supposed death scene, and a new player will likely have completely put him out of their mind by this point. I also really appreciate Nate's dialogue here.
What if it turns out he's working with them?
We either rescue him, or we beat the crap out of him. Hell, I might just beat the crap out of him anyway.
After fighting some enemies on our way upstairs, we reach a rickety bridge and get another cutscene where Elena nearly falls to her death and has to drop her camera to survive. This part is really underrated, honestly. The performances are fantastic, and the ripped-apart buildings are the perfect set piece for a scene like this. After the cutscene, we make our way around the back of the building and get on the jet ski one more time for Chapter 12. This chapter may be on the shorter side, but I think it makes the most of the time it has, with memorable encounters, exciting story developments, and fantastic performances. Now we're starting to get into the chapters with a lot of meat to them. Sanctuary is the true bridge to the late game, including heavily armored enemies, laser sights, and a much darker and gloomier aesthetic. I really like the look of this place, and while none of the encounters are particularly standout, they are all very fun. Fairly early on, we get a cutscene showing one of the traps from Chapter 4, and this is an extremely important scene. It's the only part of the game where you're pretty much explicitly told that there is in fact a third party on the island, something that has been hinted at since Chapter 3 and will continue to be hinted at until the inevitable reveal in Chapter 17. I will obviously talk more about the twist when we get there, but I do think showing these footprints was a step too far. It essentially confirms that the mysterious third party is non-human, which removes a lot of the impact and shock of a game so grounded in reality taking a sharp turn into the supernatural. Thank God I somehow missed this detail in my first playthrough. This courtyard fight is the hardest one in the game up to this point by a huge margin, but that's much more of a positive than a negative. Even a first-time player will be able to realize they've reached the late game here, and the player has been taught everything they need to know to be able to handle this encounter. Still absolutely kicked my ass though. I really like exploring this ruined sanctuary, and having a firefight inside the library only to then solve a puzzle in the exact same area is really cool design. That being said, the combat encounter right before entering the library is, honestly, a little bit much. Like I said, the courtyard encounter from earlier was already a huge difficulty spike, so having a second encounter on that same level just a few minutes later is unnecessary and really feels tedious to get through. This is one example of the game very clearly padding so it can feel longer, an issue future games in the series completely removed, thankfully. The last thing to mention here is a couple of cutscenes in the library. Sully reveals that he survived the gunshot from Chapter 3 due to Nate's journal, which is really funny even though it seems like a bit of a stretch. He was shot from 10 feet away at absolute most by a revolver, in the chest mind you, and you're telling me a little book was enough to stop the bullet? I'm no gun expert, maybe this could theoretically happen, but I highly doubt it. Regardless, this chapter ends with the most overused, I mean absolutely hilarious joke in all of fiction.
Be careful.
Come on. I always am. Ah! I did not see that!
Sanctuary? Seriously, why the hell is there a question mark there? Is a really good chapter that introduces the late game and keeps the player excited to discover what's around the next corner at every turn. Could have done without that second courtyard fight though. I wasted a half hour of my life on that for no real reason. The Drowned City is a solid chapter I don't have too much to say about. The flooded city itself is a fantastic location for this game, the combat is very fun and well balanced, and it's super cool to have Elena as a partner during proper gameplay. Speaking of Elena, Nate wants to get on a boat and abandon the mission due to being so heavily outnumbered, but she insists that they need to keep going. This is not important at all for the rest of this game, but trust me, this is a conversation that will be happening time and time again throughout the series. Just try and remember that Elena was the one who wanted to keep going and Nate was the voice of reason trying to end it. The jet ski gets introduced in this chapter, and I honestly think this is its best appearance. You control Nate to drive the jet ski and Elena to shoot a grenade launcher, and it feels pretty good all things considered. It's a little clunky since you have to stop moving whenever you want to shoot, but for the sake of balance I totally understand why that decision was made. It's a really good time, and I especially like the part where you shoot the stone weights off the door to open it, then have to wait for it to sink into the water deep enough for you to cross. Wait a minute, was that Chapter 9? Or... yeah, it was. God damn it. It can be really hard to remember what moments happen in which chapters and so many of them bleed together. If you find any other errors like this, please correct me down below, though just calling out a simple mistake and then saying nothing else is probably my least favorite type of comment to get, just keep that in mind. Nothing more to add for this one, on to the next. Plane Wrecked is a doozy of a chapter with a lot to talk about. This is easily the longest chapter and the start of the main adventure since we finally made it to the island we'll be spending the rest of the game on. It begins with Nate waking up in front of an angel statue after Roman's men shot his plane down, and he describes the situation perfectly.
Leave my map on a burning plane. Plane is missing. Most likely dead. That's great. Great start, Nate.
While we're obviously done with the tutorial at this point, the game still uses this chapter to introduce a bunch of new mechanics, such as bouncing on skinny platforms, explosive barrels that can be used against enemies, and biggest of all, grenades. These are absolutely invaluable to the series and incredibly well designed. They simultaneously prevent combat from getting frustrating by allowing you to blow up hard to shoot enemies, and prevent you from staying in one spot the whole time since you'll be forced to switch to different cover to avoid the explosion. I love how they're equally useful for your enemies as they are for yourself, and my only complaint is that there simply aren't enough for the player to pick up throughout the game. There are multiple big combat encounters here, but there's 3 in particular that really stand out. First is this section where you're climbing along the waterfall and have to contest with enemies on the cliff above. While it's extremely short and fairly easy, it's still an absolute highlight, mainly due to this iconic shot.
Pardon me.
second notable encounter is this one, where the front of the wrecked plane sits in a tree. You'll have to defeat dozens of enemies, climb up the rope to get the map from Chapter 3, and climb back down to fight even more enemies from the opposite side. This is the first encounter a player could realistically be stuck on for quite a while, and it's also the point where it starts to set in that combat can get really repetitive in this game. I just praised the grenades and how much they add to gameplay, but outside of them, there really isn't much to shake things up. You're working with the same 5 or so weapon types for the entire adventure, so it's really up to the level design and aesthetics to keep things engaging and unique. As much as I've been gushing about this game, I honestly don't think the game fully succeeded in keeping things varied enough, and this is the main reason the other games in the franchise were more positively received and hold up much better today. However, the final combat encounter in this chapter is a fantastic exception to the rule, where traps litter the arena and force you to watch your step. These traps can and will kill your enemies as well, and I cannot stress enough how much the game could have benefited from more mechanics like these traps. Ones that make individual encounters memorable and force you to rethink your strategies. This is one of the best combat sections in the game due to how it pulled these off, and I'm honestly very disappointed we didn't get to see them again. But these traps are a little odd from a lore perspective, aren't they? It doesn't seem like the type of thing Roman's men would set up, but the traps use parts from the crashed plane, meaning they would have had to been made somewhat recently. I love this bit of foreshadowing so damn much, probably my favorite instance of it in the game. Unlike the cutscene in Chapter 13, there's no special attention brought to these traps. They just exist, and it plants the seed of wonder in the player's mind without breaking their immersion in any way. With its extremely long length and surplus of memorable moments, Chapter 4 climbs its way up to the number 12 spot on my list. I am super shocked to be putting this chapter outside the top 10 considering how much I love the last act, but Race to the Rescue simply contains all of my least favorite parts of the endgame. The game's big twist has already been revealed, but this chapter does literally nothing with it outside of Nate briefly telling Sully about it. That's extremely disappointing, but to be fair, what we got instead is still pretty great, hence the placement at number 11. There are 2 massive shootouts here, and what makes this chapter stand out is that both of them take place in arenas that already had combat encounters. Some may see this as a blatant reuse of areas, which it absolutely is, let's be honest here, but I really appreciate when a game is able to do this without feeling like padding, which this chapter nails. Sully is pinned down in a courtyard outside the church, so we have to help him fend off the mercenaries. Just like the first time we were here, this part is hard as hell, but unlike the first time, the difficulty feels extremely justified since this is the second to last normal encounter. The last normal encounter comes immediately after this one, inside the church. Again, considering this is the final chapter with encounters like this, I'm totally on board putting the 2 hardest ones in the game back to back, and this one here is absolutely ruthless. There's nearly half a dozen snipers to take out, enemies pelting you with machine gun fire from the front of the church, and enemies rushing you down head on with shotguns. Contesting with all 3 enemy types can be absolutely brutal, but it's a lot of fun to work out and really satisfying to finish. Sully is here to help with both encounters, but in the hour it took me to finish this chapter on Crushing, it seems like he only helped me out a small handful of times. This is probably just the abundance of enemies rather than anything wrong with his AI, so I'm not going to hold it against the chapter. Despite the shockingly low placement, this chapter is a nice palate cleanser from the non-stop chaos of the finale, and it's a very gratifying one to make it through. Really makes the finale feel earned, which as I've said numerous times by this point, we will be getting to. Realistically, unlocking the past is just Chapter 5 Part 2, but that doesn't make it bad by any means. I really enjoyed Chapter 5 as we'll get to see soon, so I wasn't complaining whatsoever about getting some more of it. The combat encounters are overall really solid here due to the fantastic level design and one of the best music tracks in the game. I wish more songs were distinct and memorable like this one. Maybe then people would actually talk about how good this series can be with its music. I love how you have to contend with a pain-in-the-ass turret only to turn it around on the enemies yourself once you make your way up to it, and the encounter on your way there is really fun and tense since the arena is a skinny hallway. The real highlight of this chapter though is the cutscene that ends it off. Nathan sees that Elena is about to get shot, and right after saving her, he's kidnapped and thrown in a prison cell. The legend himself, Eddie Raja, walks in and starts monologuing, and like I alluded to when I talked about Out of the Frying Pan, I just can't get enough of this prick.
Fascinating document, huh? Seems like this Sir Francis was in my line of work.
Don't flatter yourself, Eddie.
Always ready to be enemies, eh? Tell you what, lead me to the gold, and I just might let you live.
Is that it? Is that my deal? Die now, or help you, and die later. Oh, it's a tough call, but you know what? I'll take die now.
Elena rips the entire goddamn wall off the prison with her Jeep, and Eddie is so shocked by this that Nate's able to just steal the map right out of his hands and escape. That leads beautifully into Chapter 7, but I've already talked about that one. It's honestly pretty hard to rank the chapters out of order since a lot of them flow into each other so well, and breaking apart the game like this can really make talking points kinda awkward. Regardless, despite not having a ton to say about it, Unlocking the Past is a fantastic chapter that extends the fortress in a really natural way. Speaking of which, if you've played this game, the fortress ranking this high probably won't shock you whatsoever. This is by design one of the most standout and memorable chunks of the game, and I loved so much about it. First is the start of the chapter, where the fortress itself is revealed with a gorgeous panning shot that zooms out and pulls its massive size into perspective. The climbing portion itself is also a blast, easily one of my favorites. I love how you finally make it to the window and assume you're done, only to have to go back out another window and climb even higher. The combat encounters in this chapter are all fantastic, especially the first couple that take place in the outside portions of the fortress. Climbing up the castle wall to find Elena's parachute was really cool, and the cutscene where Nate asks the enemies to open the gate is easily one of my favorite moments of his.
Hello?
Buka Pintu!
Siapa ini? Bicara sekarang.
Ah, crap. Sialano! Cepatan, buka pintu! Ah, tai! It worked! There he is! Up there! Get on the gun! Oh boy.
The first half of this chapter is easily the highlight, but the second half being so distinct is the biggest reason I put this one above Unlocking the Past. The dark coloration and the shallow water are super fitting for a fortress, and the part where you're basically forced to use the grenade launcher to blow up the turret is a great way to introduce both weapons. The water puzzle at the end of the chapter is really cute and unique for this game, but it's also painfully slow and could have benefited from just a little more complexity. The Fortress is a great chapter due to its fantastic environmental storytelling, really fun combat encounters, and standout set pieces. Also, the strange relic is in this chapter, so bonus points for that. Ambush is a remarkable opening to the game in pretty much every regard. It debuts basic combat, sets up the mystery behind Sir Francis Drake and the El Dorado, and has a bombastic and over-the-top action set piece to end things off. All these things are going to be massive parts of the game going forward, but the real reason this opening is so brilliant is because of how it introduces the characters. Nate, Elena, and Sully all get plenty of screen time and interactions with each other, and it establishes their personalities in such a natural and fun way. Some of my favorite lines of dialogue include,
So valuable, they couldn't risk it getting out.
All right, Nate, just pretend for a minute that I don't really care about any of that stuff and cut to the chase, would you?
Man only interested in the climax. He must be a real hit with the ladies.
Never had any complaints.
and
Shouldn't we call the authorities or something?
Yeah, that'd be a great idea, but we don't exactly have a permit to be here.
What?
Yeah, so unless you want to end up in a Panamanian jail, we should probably handle this ourselves.
What's worse?
You obviously haven't been in a Panamanian jail. Do you know how to use one of these?
Admittedly, the part where Nate calls Elena a good girl kind of makes me uncomfortable, but this game came out in 2007, so I guess I'm not surprised. Now is probably the best chance I'm going to get to talk about my feelings on this game's combat as a whole, since this is the tutorial, so let's do that now. At worst, this game feels extremely awkward to play. Nathan is kind of clunky to control, which fits his character well, but doesn't exactly make for the smoothest combat of all time. On top of that, getting in and out of cover can feel super inconsistent, especially when you're surrounded by walls on all sides, and this is something that killed me dozens of times throughout my playthrough. Those things do sting a lot, but at its best, this game has unbelievably exciting, intense combat that I can only describe as John Wick the video game. I mean, seriously, think about it. An attractive but unassuming guy who's apparently a normal human killing hundreds of people by ducking behind cover and using a massive artillery of weapons. Death Battle, I'm telling you, this is the best way to bring them both back, get on that shit. It's super close and could lead to a really unique gunfight. But anyway, combat can feel absolutely incredible at its best, and it only continues to get better as you improve and learn the feel of the game. I completely disagree with people who say the first Uncharted is just clunky and outdated. I get it, it definitely has its moments of jank, but on the whole I think it's still a blast. The arena-style level design can get monotonous, but the game is good in spite of its repetition because to me it's just that fun. Naughty Dog really put their best foot forward with this introduction, and the only reason this chapter isn't higher is because of how remarkable the last act of the game turned out to be. Speaking of which, I think it's finally time we start talking about it. One of the best things about the first Uncharted game, especially in comparison to the other games, is the atmosphere and world building. This game has been teasing and hinting at some kind of third-party involvement as early as Chapter 3, and the heart of the vault is where it finally pays off. To be brutally honest, this game was ranking pretty damn hard on this twist sticking the landing, and I'm happy to report that it absolutely does.
Hello, boys. Easy, Eddie, easy. What the hell's going on out there?
Didn't you see them?
Oh no. Oh God, no.
We're trapped.
Jesus, what is that?
We're dead. We're all dead.
Eddie, get back here! Oh, crap.
These are the Descendants, Spanish colonists from Sir Francis Drake's voyage turned into feral monsters. I really love the design of these things. They're genuinely very disturbing and have a completely unique design to most video game zombie types. If anything, they seem to be a PG-13 version of the necromorphs from Dead Space, crawling out of ventilation systems, slashing you to death in just a couple strikes on even easier difficulties, and clearly having some level of intelligence. Please give me an excuse to make a Dead Space video. God, that series is so good. The Descendants are the solution to damn near every problem this game has. The story is kinda going off the rails at this point, with the treasure seemingly moving all over the island for no reason, but these guys fully explain all of it without retconning any of the events. The flooded city makes sense now, the traps from all the way back in Chapter 4 are explained, and every other minor bit of foreshadowing finally comes to a head. The real brilliance of the Descendants, though, is their gameplay implications. As much as I very clearly adore this game, I won't deny for a second that the combat is extremely repetitive and definitely starts to feel like a chore after 16 chapters of it. Finally, we have a new enemy type that requires new strategies and feels totally different to fight than the mercenaries. Instead of ducking behind walls and chipping away at enemy health, you'll have to face them head on and absolutely pelt them with bullets. I love everything about the Descendants, and these guys alone turn what is otherwise an enjoyable but ultimately outdated game into a goddamn masterpiece that still sits as one of my favorite games of all time, though admittedly nostalgia is definitely a big factor in that too. As for the chapter itself, I mean, it's number 7, of course it kicks ass. The run and gun segment is absolutely perfect, the simplistic arena does a great job teaching you the mechanics of your new enemies, and the cutscene revealing the Descendants is one of my favorites in any video game. I've already talked about the Descendants to death, but the man of the hour here is Eddie goddamn Raja himself getting one more chance to shine with Nathan Drake. The way they both team up and clarify how much they hate each other, the way Nathan first greets them as they walk into the vault, and the way he screams down the chasm are all absolutely perfect. And if all of that wasn't awesome enough, the final cutscene in this chapter is a perfect transition into The Bunker was by far the trickiest chapter to place on this list. On its own merits, it's probably not even in the top 10, but what really elevates it is how it sets up the next chapter. I'll go over most of this one now, but I'll be saving the ending for when we get to chapter 19. I promise it'll make more sense then. Nate needs to turn on the power by finding the generator room, and to get over there he has to climb over the entire bunker from the outside. This is one of the best climbing sections in the game, scurrying up and down pipes only to shimmy across the ceiling with the U-boat directly below you. I love the idea that the Germans actually found the island themselves before the events of the game and set up a bunker here. It makes the story feel much more dynamic. The present day isn't just some magical time where everyone finds the treasure at once, it's a part of history that multiple groups took part in. After reaching the scaffolding on the other side, Sully tries to get in contact with Nate, but the radio cuts out. This is admittedly a cliche, but it's still super effective at setting up the atmosphere, which is absolutely incredible here. The pipes on the walls, the super eerie lighting, the sense of isolation, it's all on point. On his way to the generator room, Nate encounters more Descendants. This part really feels like it's from a Resident Evil game, and that is absolutely a compliment. Sorry for the abrupt ending, but like I said, the real magic of this chapter comes from how this atmosphere continues into chapter 19, so we'll be finishing talking about it when we get there. We've made it to the top 5, and spoilers, most of the video from this point forward is just going to be me gushing about how incredible the final act of this game is. We'll go back and look at chapters 16 through 19 very soon, but for now let's talk about the 2 finale chapters. Golden Bones is absolutely incredible, and the fact that one of the shortest chapters in the game made it to the top 5 is genuinely just very impressive. This chapter consists of a brief walk down some catacombs, the best cutscene in the game, one of the best cutscenes in the game, and an incredible combat encounter I wish wasn't nearly so short. The catacombs just act as a breather before the pulse-pounding and non-stop ending of this game, but I do really like it and think it serves its purpose very well. The cutscene at the bottom, though? I cannot stress enough that this is the perfect payoff to everything this game has been building to. We've been chasing El Goddamn Dorado for 20 chapters at this point, and when we finally get to see it, it's absolutely breathtaking and feels extremely worthy of all the hype surrounding it. This is especially true when Navarro tricks Roman into opening it, revealing that this thing is still just as potent a weapon now as it was when it wiped out Sir Francis Drake's crew. Navarro explains things perfectly here.
Navarro, that thing wiped out an entire colony. You don't know what you're doing.
Wrong. I'm the only person on this island who knows what the hell he's doing. Cargue la estatua. Cuidado! You are so pathetic. All of you, scrambling around for your petty treasures. Do you have any idea what this is worth? To the right buyer?
I love how genuine Nathan sounds. He's legitimately super concerned about the capabilities of El Dorado now that he has all the information on it, and he tells Navarro straight up with no bullshit that this thing could lead to horrific devastation if it gets in the wrong hands. Even better is what comes next.
Oh no, what the hell is that? Jesus, what are those things?
It's the Spaniards, Sully. They never left. My God, if that thing gets off the island...
You gotta stop him. I'll cover you from here.
Sully's reaction to seeing the Descendants for the first time, the way they both steal the shotguns from the goons and cock them at the ready, the Descendants crawling all over the cave, the way the mercenaries get totally wiped out by them, it's all fantastic. The brief combat encounter is pretty fun while it lasts, but it doesn't last long at all. Run down some stairs, run up some stairs, and blast a bunch of enemies on the way. The cutscene ending off the chapter is the most Uncharted thing of all time. Just watch this shit. That is some of the thickest plot armor I've ever seen in a video game, and you know what? I couldn't ask for anything more fitting for this franchise. That scene directly transitions into the grand finale, so let's get into that. Showdown acts as the closest thing this game has to a boss fight, and our opponent is Navarro and a dozen or so of his men. While this is a pretty simple gunfight, I think the presentation and intensity of the scene really make it work. The bright red sky, the downpour of rain, the red beam from Navarro's laser sight piercing through the darkness, this is outstanding stuff. Navarro is really interesting from a gameplay perspective too. He fires 3 scattered shots that aren't likely to hit you, followed by 1 really precise shot that is guaranteed to hit you unless you're behind cover. Adding to this, the only cover you have to work with are these boxes, which break after taking enough bullets. This basically puts you on a timer for the first 3 sections. You have to take out all the enemies before your cover is literally blown and you have nowhere to hide. Navarro himself is completely invincible, and after killing all of his goons, he'll run to the next section and repeat until the true finale. I really enjoyed this battle. It's the perfect length, tests your skills effectively, and has a flawless atmosphere. The final bit of gameplay in this game takes place on the helicopter landing pad, and this is one hell of an ending. Navarro blows the gun on Nate's hand, so now he's completely defenseless and somehow has to defeat him with his bare hands. After working his way towards Navarro by hiding behind these very conveniently placed boxes, Nate lays his ass out in a QuickTime event and knocks the gun out of his hands. Navarro then lays Nate's ass out and kicks him to the ground, only for Nate to sprint back towards Navarro and kick his ass one final time to begin the final cutscene. Gameplay-wise, this is nothing special. Hell, I'd go so far as to say it's pretty bad, but like the chapter as a whole, the presentation is so strong that I still end up loving it. So how about that ending? It begins with Nate saving Elena from the helicopter, followed by a hilariously convenient but still pretty awesome villain death.
Oh, Nate!
Adios, asshole.
With El Dorado at the bottom of the ocean and all the antagonists dead, Nate and Elena lament that they went through all of that and ended up empty-handed. But then, Sully shows up out of nowhere and reveals that he found a bunch of treasure. Where did he get it from?
Sully, you beautiful son of a bitch!
Borrowed it off a couple of pirates who were too dead to care.
God damn it, I can't help but love this reveal. It's so ridiculously stupid that it wraps back around to being amazing, and I love how we come full circle and reference the very first chapter of the game. Due to the danger of El Dorado, it doesn't feel like the adventure was in vain at all, despite the only tangible reward being earned at the very start. If this adventure didn't happen, who knows who could have gotten hold of El Dorado and what kind of things they would have done with it. Nate and Elena embrace each other, implying the start of a relationship, which, by the way, is going to be very on and off, and the 3 of them sail off to their next adventure. It's far from flawless. In fact, out of all the chapters in the top 10, this is probably the one that has the most issues, but I couldn't really ask for a better finale to a game like this. A lot of my favorite video games have that one level towards the start that really gets you excited. That realization that you're about to play something special is such a powerful and amazing feeling that no other form of media can truly replicate. Some examples that come to mind are Stormvale Castle from Elden Ring, Cascade Kingdom from Super Mario Odyssey, and of course, a surprising find from the first Uncharted. Holy shit, there is so much amazing stuff packed into this chapter. Let's start with the climbing segment that kicks things off, where you make your way up and then back down the cliff face to reach the top of the U-boat. This is the first major climbing portion of the game, and it's easily one of the best. The waterfall is absolutely gorgeous, the sunset is breathtaking, and, something a little different, 2 of the best and most memorable treasures in the game can be found here. One can be found by climbing an optional ledge, and another is on the very front of the U-boat. Honestly, pretty disappointing. These are two of the only individually memorable treasure locations in the game, but we got a lot more to talk about, so let's head inside. The atmosphere in here is unsettling and claustrophobic, and I love the cutscene at the end where Nate discovers the island where the rest of the adventure will be taking place. The disgusting corpse being the very first hint towards the descendants is well done, even if it always scared me as a kid, and the way the explosion is foreshadowed on your way out is also really neat. Upon swimming back to Sully, Nate finds the main antagonist and a bunch of their goons surrounding them, and apparently they all know each other? Sully owing Roman a bunch of money makes complete sense and justifies all the enemies throughout the game, but Nate knowing him as well makes no sense and has zero impact on the plot. Everyone in this franchise just inexplicably knows everyone else, and as the games progress, it starts to get more and more hilarious. Roman just flat out shooting Sully without hesitation had my jaw on the floor when I first played this game. We just spent the entirety of Chapter 2 getting to know the guy and setting up his relationship with Nate, only for the main antagonist to murder him in cold blood not even 30 minutes afterwards. What a fantastic early game twist that keeps the player on their toes and sets up Roman as a serious threat. The U-boat then explodes and Nate is able to use this time to escape. After a brief chase sequence, Elena shows up out of nowhere and rejoins Nate. This timing is a little too convenient, but I love her return, and the idea that she was so invested in the story that she tracked them down all the way here says a lot about her character. She's definitely somewhere in the damsel in distress archetype, but what makes her far more interesting is her willingness to get her hands dirty and take care of herself. She's easily one of my favorite gaming heroines, and I love her role in this game as a whole. After the cutscene, we get to work our way backwards through Chapter 2, fighting enemies along the way, and this is absolutely ingenious. It's blatantly reusing an area from previously, but it's such a different context than before that it feels entirely new. This may very well be the best encounter in the game that doesn't feature descendants. That's how perfectly it was executed. After it's over, we get to see Nate and Elena make their way towards the island, and Roman's men shoot down the plane. The scene where they jump out is super full of character, and I especially love the final part.
What am I doing? Okay, you just jump, count to 5, and pull the cord. How hard could that be? Oh, crap!
And with that, there's just 2 chapters left. After this most recent playthrough, I knew exactly what the top 2 would be and what order they would be in. If this were a tier list, we'd be entering the SS tier now. Let's take a look at 2 of my favorite video game levels of all time. I've been trying for almost an hour to come up with a way to introduce the treasure vault, but I just can't. The game itself does it far better than I ever could.
What is this place?
A really elaborate way to hide the damn treasure.
A giant, elaborate maze with moving parts and alternate paths all over the place? This is a goddamn Zelda dungeon. There's no item to find, and the combat is mostly separate from the puzzles and pathfinding, but this is still so damn cool. Nate's journal has 3 Roman numerals in it, and those are the numbers you'll have to follow. It really is that simple, but the way the vault is laid out and the presentation of the area make it seem far more complicated than it actually is. Fairly early on, you'll have to pull this lever to slide this chain over, which opens up a new path and actually forces you to go against what the numbers are telling you. There's these spiky brazers swinging back and forth to add a little bit of challenge, and these are a one-hit kill, so don't mess around. A couple of times you'll zoom in and see the descendants jumping around in the background, which is very direct foreshadowing, but fitting for the chapter right before their proper introduction. The treasures are far more satisfying to collect in this chapter since they give you an excuse to explore incorrect paths, though I'm not sure why there's only 3 of them to find. After a lot of exploring and some careful jumping, you'll eventually ride an elevator down to open a door for Elena. After a short walk with her, Eddie Raja and dozens of his men burst into the vault, and a shootout begins. Here you're running up spiral staircases and still trying to follow the numbers from earlier, all while mercenaries attack you from a bunch of different angles. It's extremely difficult and fairly lengthy, but the verticality, navigational challenge, and exceptional atmosphere make this encounter one of the best in the game.
Oh god, Nate!
After it's over, we've reached the heart of the vault, and there's a brief cutscene revealing that Sir Francis Drake slaughtered his entire crew in this very room. The best part of this chapter, though? From start to finish, the atmosphere is flawless. The music, dim lighting, winding staircases, bottomless pits, and gorgeous architecture all come together to make one of the most memorable locations in any video game for me. I never expected something like this to come from Uncharted, but I'm so glad they took the risk and tried because it more than paid off. And Chapter 17 being an amazing twist immediately after this level, are you seeing how good this game is now? But somehow, the best is yet to come. After clearing Chapter 17 and most of Chapter 18, we reach this crank to turn on the power in the generator room.
Thank God.
The super abrupt tonal shift, the constant blaring of the alarms, the dim lighting in super tight spaces, the clear and simple objective, this is how you kick off a chapter. Unwelcome guests waste no time getting the adrenaline pumping as the player has to flip switches on either side of the generator room while hordes of descendants pour out of the ventilation and sewage systems. It's intense as hell, the music is amazing, and the gameplay is exhilarating. After pulling both levers, you'll have to make your way out of the bunker, which can actually be a bit of a maze. Eventually, you'll stumble across this room with a projector that mirrors the one you passed in Chapter 18. This time, though, a video showing the true horrors of Dorado is playing, and Nate reads a chilling note from Sir Francis Drake himself.
Is near. The devils hunt for me in the darkness. The gold of El Dorado bears a terrible curse. The Spaniards have unleashed hell, become as demons. My men have all been murdered, leaving the task to me alone. No ship will depart this island. I destroyed them all and drowned the cursed city. A thing of such great evil must never leave these shores. In my final hour, I commend my soul to God. May He have mercy on this unholy place. Francis Drake. My God.
After the cutscene, we have to clear out even more descendants to open the door, only to be confronted by Roman and Navarro with Elena in their grasp. Over the intercom, Roman reveals that he now knows the current location of El Dorado thanks to Nate's map, and Nate's reaction to this as they walk away is absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Keep smiling, asshole. I'll see you soon.
Now it's time for one massive combat encounter to end off the chapter, by a landslide the best one in the game. This section is a prime example of my favorite video game trope, the enemy of my enemy. In other words, a combat encounter where multiple enemy types are fighting each other as well as you. Let's start with the strategies this type of encounter opens up. Want to sit back and watch the enemies kill each other? Sure. Want to lure the enemies into each other and away from you? Go for it. Want to play things straight and just take them all on at once? Hell yeah, you can do that too. All these strategies are fun in their own right, and mixing and matching them together whenever you feel like is also on the table since there's so much going on and there's so much to keep track of. It's chaotic, it's dynamic, and it almost feels like a crossover of sorts. Sure, all these enemy groups are from the same game, but when you're so used to fighting each of them separately, it almost feels surreal to see them fighting each other. It makes the world and story feel that much more alive, too. The whole universe doesn't just revolve around your player character. There's other types of conflicts going on with various motives to consider. You're just one part of a massive story. But how does this chapter specifically combine these enemies? Is it a case of just lazily throwing them in a single arena and calling it a day? Not in the slightest. When I think of the enemy of my enemy, this is actually the first game that comes to mind because this encounter is such a masterful example of it. It starts off in the observation room where a few mercenaries will come and ambush you from the stairs. After taking them on, you'll make your way down and possibly find that the enemies at the bottom aren't even aiming at you. Once they're dead, descendants will round the corner, making the player realize where the game is likely going with this. After rounding the corner, there is zero ambiguity left. A descendant is ripping a mercenary apart, and more of them start pouring out of the sewers at the same time. A sniper is also targeting you from above, making this encounter absolutely ruthless until he's defeated. You can't hide behind cover and pick away at the enemies like normal because the descendants will slash you. You can't run away from the descendants because then you'll get shot, and you can't stand still to take care of the descendants because then you'll likely get shot by the sniper. It is a devious yet brilliant combination of mechanics and honestly one of my favorite designs for any video game level. It's fast-paced, challenging, unique, fun, unforgettable, and for me personally, extremely nostalgic as well. There's even a bonus treasure on top of these boxes to add even more to this. It is remarkable to me that Naughty Dog managed to make a level this phenomenal in their first attempt at a game like this, and I cannot give it enough praise. One thing I'd like to do for all my ranking videos is come up with some sort of criticism for number 1, and here the worst thing I can say is that the snipers are a little too easy to take out. Having more of them or not giving the player access to their own sniper rifle could have made things a lot more interesting, but on the whole, what a chapter. Damn near flawless from start to finish, diverse and varied throughout, fair but challenging, one of my favorite video game levels of all time, and absolutely worthy of being the best chapter in Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. And that is every Uncharted chapter ranked, a video I'm still stunned nobody has made until now. I'd absolutely love to do this for the rest of the series at some point, so if you like this video and want to see it, let me know by leaving a comment and subscribing. Doing those things allows this video to get way more attention, and if you think my channel deserves it, I would greatly appreciate your help. Speaking of help, I got a ton of it from people in my Discord server, which you can join for free with the link below. Dragon helped me proofread the script, and Violet and Crinkle helped me edit the thumbnail. They made it look phenomenal, and I wouldn't have known what to do whatsoever without their editing skills. Thank you guys so much, and another shout out to my girlfriend for doing a full-on photo shoot with me to get these pictures. I am genuinely blown away by how amazing they turned out. Thank you so much, Kyra. Before I wrap it up, I want to share a few minor criticisms I have about the game, since I doubt I'll return to it anytime soon and don't want people to think my channel is just blindly gushing with zero critiques. I'm not just a blind and biased fanboy who feeds on nothing but nostalgia, I swear. The enemies all being males with very similar accents is kinda weird. Does this group just refuse to hire women or anyone of a different race? Are they all part of a hive mind and that's why they have similar generic and cliche bad guy lines when you die? On a similar topic, Nathan Drake mercilessly killing hundreds of people during gameplay with zero remorse completely goes against the character they clearly want him to be. Like seriously, this dude has probably killed more people in one game than John Wick did in 4 movies, mostly just so we can get the treasure before them, yet I'm supposed to be rooting for this psychopath? I said these issues were minor because the game doesn't take itself too seriously, so I'm able to shut my brain off, play the game, and enjoy the wackiness. Now, if they were to start taking things more seriously without addressing these issues, we may start to have more problems, but surely Naughty Dog would never do that to a series whose whole identity is built around being campy and fun. Right? Okay, I love Uncharted 4 and think it's a great game, but I really wish Naughty Dog would keep the series more light and fun and save the more serious and thought-provoking stuff for The Last of Us. Speaking of The Last of Us, that's a series I love even more than Uncharted somehow, and to celebrate Season 2 of the show coming out on my birthday, my next 2 videos will be ranking every combat encounter across both titles. I hope to see you guys there. Have a fantastic day. I'm about halfway through editing at this point, but I felt the need to come on here and correct a few things because there are 2 pretty massive mistakes that I realized in this video that I know I'm going to get comments about, and I just wanted to nip up in the butt right now so that everyone knows I'm already aware of it, and I absolutely plan to fix these issues for the next video. The first one is very simple. I did not turn subtitles on. My thinking at the time was, oh, if I have the subtitles on, it'll get in the way of the gameplay, and then you won't be able to see what's happening. But it also meant that cutscenes are really boring, and so there's a lot of this video that's just watching people talk, and since you don't have subtitles, you can't really see what's happening. That was a big mistake. I absolutely will be turning them on next time. So sorry about that. And then the second one is the search for El Dorado. I put that way, way too low. I do agree with the criticisms. I agree with everything I said, but I don't understand why I let the negatives get to me that much. I don't think it being a pace killer is really enough to justify being the 4th worst in the game. I would put it at least 5 to 8 spots higher, I would say. There's actually quite a few placements that I would probably swap around if I were to redo this, but that was the big one. That's the one that really was like, okay, I clearly messed up. So yeah, if you were going to comment about either of those things, you can go ahead and delete it now, or you can still be an asshole and do it anyway, and then I'll just accuse you of not watching the video, so that's fine too. I hope to see you guys for the next one. Hopefully it's not nearly as long of a wait. This took way longer to make than I thought it would, by a significant margin. I think this is probably the longest video I've ever made. I think it pretty easily overtook the Tropical Freeze one, although the Tropical Freeze finale was pretty damn hard too, because I had to keep track of all the banana counts and all the improvements and everything like that too. So it was close, and I had a vacation in the middle of this as well. That was another thing. But yeah, that should do it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.